You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Hey, man, thanks for joining me. Why don't you tell us who you are and why you're wearing a mask and all the things, man. Tell us who you are and the audience what you're doing here.
Well, my name is Luther Chip Harris. I am a cyber criminal investigator, and I'm a certified ethical hacker, pen tester, forensic investigator, and auditor. So I deal with not the nicest people on the planet that, are here to do you and the general public harm. And I've been the reason why I wear a mask, and I get a lot of questions around that, is to protect my identity. I've been doxxed, twice, and I've had to been moved. The federal government had to move me once to an undisclosed location, and it was very impactful to me, and I go very hard on protecting my identity against these threat actors from Russia and China, that have come after me and my family. And, I take my security and my, security very, very, as I say, to a whole nother level of paranoia to protect my family, as well as myself, and I have worked with military and special forces for the better part, of a long time. And there are people that wish me dead, so there you go. That is the reason why when I do a lot of these podcasts, I take it to the nth level and I wear a mask to protect my identity from, for example, the people that wanted me have deported, which was China, which they have some great facial recognition software. Yeah. They're really good at tracking down where you're at in your location to send a death squad to come and eliminate you. Sure. So therefore, I have, go to very great lengths to protect my online identity, behind, let's say, my 4 firewalls that I have here and my 6 proxies that, that protect me and my IP that rolls every 30 minutes to make sure that you do not know where it is and who it is that I am. So I'm kind of the Banksy of the internet, so I go very hard on, to the paint to protect myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive in, man. I appreciate you taking the time today, and we don't know each other. We just started communicating through LinkedIn, but I've done a lot in critical infrastructure, and my background is power generation and critical infrastructure as well, and working in OT spaces and power plants and all that. So I know we talked off camera a little bit before this, so let's just dive in. Let's talk about the aging infrastructure. Let's talk about the power plants and the wastewater and the water treatment facilities and where we at with that and what you're seeing and obviously the things that you can talk about publicly of the status and criticality of those environments.
Well, I'm a state and federal pain in the ass because normally when they call me, it's pretty damn bad. I mean, it's like, it's never like a warm reception like, "Ooh, look, he's here to help solve the problem." No. My job is to tell you what the problem is and how to go fix it. Now, you can take all that information for all you want, and it is left up to you. So I always tell people, do as thy will. So, that's one thing that I tell people, especially when it comes down to critical infrastructure that I have to deal with, is that, there is a totalitarian, fallout of when these things go bad that affect human people, that affect, human beings. Sure. So it's not just like, IT where it's, you're dealing with data and servers and, stuff like this. I mean, you're dealing with physical infrastructure. You're dealing with power generation. You're dealing with water, so forth. And right now it's pretty bad. I mean, most of this stuff, and I know this is not a political show and I don't deal with politics. I cut through a boulder of red tape daily just to get stuff done, so I have enough of that I have to deal with on the state and the federal side. But, as I tell people, our infrastructure is aging out and getting really old, 30 years old. Yeah. And, people are like, well, which administration do we blame? Well, I'm part of the blame party. I blame both of them. It's like you've had 30 years under multiple, administrations to get the stuff fixed. Yeah. And it's not what I call sexy news. Like, ooh, we're going to work on the water treatment facility today and, get better pipelines put in the ground. And, we're going to start repaving roads, and stuff like that. These are things that are steadily, it's what I call the death of 1,000 cuts. It's, you're slowly getting cut and you're slowly bleeding, But then after you get about 1,000 cuts, I drop you into a huge, gigantic ocean full of sharks and piranhas that are there to basically eat and destroy you, because that's what these people do. And it's not that we don't know that threat actors like, Russia, China, Iran have not hit our nuclear power grids, or our power systems at all, or, our water treatment facilities. We know that these countries that are, what I call the dirty 30 countries, because there's about 30 of them out there that want us, dead, as the infidels, and they want to do us harm, that they hit constantly, from low kinetic attacks to high level, cyber attacks. And it's just a matter of time before they get it. It's not a matter of time of when they're going to do something. It's when they want to do something based on their time clock. And my job is to help roll that time clock back the best I possibly can. Especially in the power industry, especially in nuclear, that's a very big thing. People in the United States don't realize that, hey, there's 53 nuclear reactors throughout the continental United States. Well, if one of those goes up, and blows up, that's a very bad situation for about 100,000 years. So, and when I explain that to the general public and the populace, that kind of gets them scared, and it gets politicians scared, and it gets a lot of people scared. Well, they should be scared, because guess what? Would you, do you still own a 30-year-old car? No. Do you still, drive on 30-year-old, trains and railroad tracks? Yeah. Do you drive on 30-year-old planes? No. But do you drive on 30-year-old subways? Yes. So, the poison that I try to, and the bitter pill that I try to get people to swallow, that I deal with on a daily basis, is that this is completely fixable. It can be done. It's expensive. It's I call a green paper problem. There's a lot of money that's got to be invested into doing this. And this current administration actually has passed an infrastructure bill to where we're starting to see improvement on roads, improvement on streets, improvement on bridges, lighting for streets, and it's going to be a gradual rollout. But, as I tell people, you should be spending about 20% of your state's GPD, and the federal GPD should be at least 25 to 30% just on infrastructure projects throughout the continental United States. Will that ever happen? Well, until it starts breaking and failing, then they'll start doing it. When the bodies start piling up and people die, it hits the news, and then everybody goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." And I'm like, "No, I can believe it."
Yeah, I mean, I supported a nuclear power plant. I was an asset owner and supported power generation here in Texas. And one of my plants was a nuclear facility. So I was badged there, and, the whole background check and all that kind of stuff, supporting that. And the architecture was different in a nuclear power plant than it was my coal-fired power plants and the others. But still, that plant was built I think it was designed in the 50s, built in the 60s, went online in the 70s, and it's still the same technology, 2 units, 1,800 megawatts, and it's still running, right? It's still the same thing. They actually had a license to build a 3rd and 4th unit that they ended up getting rid of the license, it's yes, we've upgraded the controls somewhat. The analog controls, they have tertiary systems and everything, safety systems and tertiary everything, but the analog controls that were put in the 70s are still there, right? Yes, we have some digital stuff. Yes, we have some upgraded stuff, but still, it's a plant that was built in the 70s. And to your point, it's not that it's bad. It's just, it was never designed to run that long. They actually call it Comanche Peak because it was going to be a peaker plant. It was supposed to be ramped up and down. That's how little they understood about nuclear generation at the time when it was designed. And of course, now it's a base load. It just runs constantly all the time, unless it's an outage for refueling every 18 months. So, talk a little bit about what, obviously that's the norm. Like power, I think there's been two nuclear power plants built in the United States in the last 15 years. And
there's a couple 3 more that are built. Yeah, there's 3 more that are scheduled, and they're being built by Microsoft. They're being built by Bill Gates. So the guy that created Windows, which is not the greatest operating system on the planet, is going to be in charge and own nuclear power facilities. Now, I'm not saying that that's set up for failure, but I'm just setting it up for a lot of questions and answers. It's
Right.
like, wow, you people can't even make an operating system that can't be hacked, so you're going to make a goddamn nuclear power plant? I mean, so anyway, it's just, and when you're dealing with FERP and NERP and all those guys, and all the regulations and stuff that go with it, I mean, and we've learned from 3 Mile Island, when that happened, the safety and the security that deals with this stuff, and it is issues and stuff that we have to be able to address. First off, from a human standpoint, and then an environmental standpoint. Now, I'm not a tree hugging hippie by any means whatsoever, but I am a conservationist. But I tell people that you have to respect the land that's given to us. You have to respect the environment and stuff that's there. And can we go a little bit greener? Yeah, we can go hard to the paint. If we wanted to put up more, solar, we could do that. I mean, that, the free energy, now it's going to have to be in certain locations, and it's only going to hurt, help certain power grids, but, and it's a really cool thing to see some of the new technologies that's coming out there. But then I say, okay, that's just really cool and all. Just because it's really cool and neat and can do these great things, is it, and it gives you more, and we are addicted in this country to convenience. We really have become addicted to convenience. Just because it's convenient necessarily doesn't mean it's secure,
Sure.
And I say that a lot, the audits and the investigations and stuff that I do, when I really start taking a look at this stuff and going, wow, and I'm going to give an example. They called me in on a Colonial Pipeline just to look at the evidence, just to look at the stuff that was there. And those SCADA-based systems are running on Windows XP Service Pack 1. And I was like going, wow, this company makes over $1 billion, $1 billion. And they couldn't even upgrade this right. I mean, they couldn't even, and people would just got, and the problem was, the reason why they turned all that off was the gas and the oil still going to flow, at a whopping 7 to 15 miles an hour, depending on how far they're pushing it through the pipe. But the problem is it pushes it through all these different states. And when it fails, that gave the state attorney generals the ability to look into how much they're getting charged. So it's like, why is Mississippi getting charged more than Alabama is for the same amount of fuel going through? And that's what they said, okay, turn it all off until we get it all fixed, because they didn't want to be audited by all the states that they have to get the oil to go through.
Right.
So it was a money decision. It wasn't like, the gas is going to run out. It's not going to run out, people. I mean, we have a plethora of oil in this country if we need to get it, from the national stockpile all the way down to fracking if we have to,
Sure.
We're not going to run out of natural gas. We're not going to run out. I mean, we have a lot more resources than the, people think that we don't have, that we actually do have, but the problem is those telephone poles have been there a lot longer than that pipeline has, and some of the, and when I finished up that, looking at the stuff that, that was presented by my states to me to look at, that I didn't even charge them for. I did it totally pro bono. I was like going, you're getting screwed by this pipeline because, you have the right to audit them for, the taxes that they're charging for you for these certain things. And they actually took it to, the state Supreme Court. They lost, and they said, oh, we're going to take it to the Supreme Court. And they said, bring it. Because, you say that you're supposed to be charging us this rate, but you're actually charging us this rate. And that's like 3 times the normal than the other states that you were charging. So, it was very interesting, to say the least, to see the, the politics that actually ran out of that. And they finally said, okay, we'll just cut you a check. We'll just cut you a check and we'll make it all go away. The lawyers will be happy and whatnot. But did it really fix anything? No. It is like, did you go out there and replace that older system that was out there that was causing these issues? No. All they did was turn it right back on. It's doing the exact same thing, and they followed back up with another, audit. And the DOE said, yeah, guess what? They're using the exact same systems. They're going to keep paying the fine than it would be to the fix. And I'm like, that just makes, no sense to me whatsoever. But then the crashing reality said, It's just easier for them to pay the parking ticket than it is in the fine than it is for them to do the fix. And that's where we're missing the point. Yeah. That is where, NERP and, CISA and all these regulatory bodies that we have in Washington should come down on them like the wrath of friggin' God, because instead of just paying for the fine, which is a bump in the road for them, basically, they should be fixing that system so that we don't have the loss of fuel, and whatnot. Same thing with PG&E. PG&E had over, 30-something, 40-something years the ability of placing J-hooks that hold their lines up, on their phone poles. And, you literally had a phone pole drop a line, during fire season, during their summer, that caused the Paradise Fire that, burned hundreds. I mean, it's the third biggest fire ever in California history where it burned hundreds of thousands of acres of land and burned cities down to the ground, and there was no alerting or warning system, and it caused a Paradise Fire that literally, had people burning alive, and that's the human loss. And will we ever see, PG&E going out there and start replacing these things? Well, guess what? This year they've started doing that because people have started filing multi-million-dollar lawsuits for losing their loved ones, which they should, and you have a city in California that's suing their own power company within their own state because they had the opportunity to fix these things and they never really did. Sure. So, and in a way, what I deal with all at that level is a blame game. This hand's pointing at this thing. Well, you're all responsible. They're all trying to blame each other. But it's like, congratulations, that blame is actually put onto you as a whole, as a blanketed, carpeted thing, not just, one person for one decision that they did or did not make, and it's, what we're dealing with now. And I tell people this is like all these old systems. Let's put it on the internet, which is a really bad idea, And it's like, I was at a conference last year where the director of cybersecurity had on his iPad on the plane, he was showing me like, hey, I can take a look at, all this kind of cool stuff, of my entire, power plant and my coal fire plant and my water treatment facility and all this stuff right here on my iPad. And I was like going, okay, what if I hack your iPad? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, if I get into your user account and I own your account, I now own those systems. And he's like, that's not totally possible. This is a, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. So I turned on Kali Linux and he was sitting right next to me in the convention. And I said, I literally, made a pop-up that popped up on his screen. It's like, hi there, I'm the guy sitting next to you that now owns your iPad, that now owns your account, and, everything. And dude, he flipped out. He was like, I'm going to sue you. And I'm like, you can't do shit, dude. I'm seriously. I mean, you said it couldn't be done. I did it within about 15 minutes. And congratulations. Now you got to go change all your user accounts and everything for all your stuff. And better yet, you should not be doing your monitoring, from a Surface or an iPad for your, systems. And, do I blame the manufacturer for that? No. Do I blame, the administration for that? Yes. You should not, there's a certain level of security in, well, did you not think this through for 30 seconds conversation? That should be happening when you're dealing with some of these systems. It's like, do we need to put that on the internet? Do we still need to be able to have the ability of hand cranking it? If something goes wrong, and there's lots of examples out there, that I tell the general public, like, Black Energy, Sandworm, there's some really good books and some white papers that are floating around out there if you really want to learn about what it is a nation state, can do. We've all heard of Stuxnet and all the kind of stuff that can go with that. Yeah, and there's a little spy and intrigue and stuff that kind of goes into that. But there's some other operations that they've written books about that are way more, devastating, that I've seen out there. And I've participated in some of those, attacks as a nation attacking another nation on their infrastructure. So it can be very delicate, but there is a human toll and factor that goes with that, and people don't want to acknowledge that yet. They just think it's a bunch of make-believe and, the power just cut off. But I'm going to give you a very real-world example, and I've explained this one before. I was hired by a medical company, and a hospital to come in and test with my red team, and my little happy band of hackers that I work with, to come in and do a red teaming event on a hospital to see how secure they were, because they had just spent a ton of money with General Electric and Siemens and name a vendor and throw it on a wall, and they stuck there, right? Of how their IoT systems were and how their trace and trackability are, and how their firewalls have all been done. But guess what? I found out very quickly that their IT and their OT merged together, which are two things. And if anybody hears this podcast, anybody out there in the world hears me, you do not merge your information technology systems and your OT systems together. Don't. This one should be way over here on this side of the universe, and the other one should be way over there. They should not even be in the same conversation. But I found out very quickly that they had commingled both of those systems, but they had thought they had been separated.
Yeah.
So, and this was just a simple, explanation. And then after about, 2 weeks, they gave us 14 days to really kind of get in there. And we were within their system within 4 hours. And then, we had physically tested, from low kinetic attacks to high level attacks, everything that we could, on their systems. And then, here I am, suit and tie, not my normal jeans and t-shirt like I am, no mask and everything, and I'm in a very closed room with what I call decision-making people, the decision-making cats, the people that have the checkbook, that paid all this money and everything. And I had, the 300-page report, but of course, they only want what I call the 2-pager report. They just want the 10 minutes bad and the 30 minutes of good. Well, guess what? It's all bad.
Rich dummy version, right?
Yeah. The very simple terms to people that are not IT technologists. They're doctors. These people they are not an IT staff kind of people. These are people that, their job is to go out there and save people's lives. Mine is to kill people's lives. My job is to end it. Theirs is to save it. So, and, after I had done this explanation of like, hi there, within, 20 minutes, I would be able to get into your systems and delete all of your EMR, your patient record systems. Okay. Then I would, be able to turn on your HVA system and turn it on to the coldest settings that's possibly out there on your, chillers and everything that's on, the building itself. I would turn on the sprinkler system and then, turn the lights off and then cut the power to your life-giving care systems, which is, if anybody's been in a hospital, you see those colored plugs that are on the wall there. Mm-hmm. That's a completely different electrical system than it would be for your lights and so forth. So not only would I turn off your lights, I would turn off that stuff. So that means the people that are in, the ER, the emergency room, are basically, at a loss. And people that are in critical care, as well as the NICU units, basically you've got, people that are going to start dying and babies that are going to start dying very quickly. Yep. And you've got, water, and toilets overflowing. You've got no power. You've got no way of tracking and tracing the stuff. And then I, turn on all of the doors to where everything is locked, because you've got an automated locking system for all your doors. So I've locked all your systems, and then I'm going to do this during like a very inclement weather, time. So for example, I'm going to do it like if it's up north, like a really bad snowstorm. This is when I'm going to do this. So things are freezing. People and patients are going to have to start going from, beds, can't use the elevators because I've already cut all those off, down the stairs, or being evacuated by helicopter or ambulance to another facility. Okay. Right. And, after I, went through this horrific conversation for about, 20 minutes, one of the doctors said, well, this would never happen. I said, well, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually it has. And he's like, no, it hasn't. I was like, well, yeah, it has. I was down there when it happened. And he was like, what are you talking about? I said, Hurricane Katrina. Mm-hmm. Nobody's learned from that. This is the scenario that happened at Hurricane Katrina. Well, what happened to the backup power supply? Well, or the backup generator. Well, it was flooded with seawater. You can't, it was dead. DOA. I mean, all your fail safes failed,
Yeah.
and, can this be done now in a digital kinetic attack versus a physical environmental attack?
Right.
Well, yeah, because I did it within, a couple days. And I could build that into an attack package, to where now, I can execute that very quickly and quietly, over the wire, and you would never even know about it.
And
So,
if you can do it, then who else can do it, right?
Yeah, and my 5 guys, we're very separated by different states, but it's like, I'm sitting here at home doing this on a, work computer. Not an HPC, not a high performance computer, not on a quantum bullshit, whatever the hell they pull out of their butt now, computer. I'm doing this from a home computer, that is not as super duper powerful as you would think it is. Okay.
Sure.
And, this scared the living bejesus out of these people. And I said, this is the reason why you have vendor management and control, that you're constantly working with, a patch management cycle, and then you've got all of these departments all together, and cybersecurity people and your IT people and your network people all together all at once to sit down, and then nobody leaves the room until we make a very good plan and decision and execute that, right? And then you think about the evils that can happen, of what can be done to stop these things. Now, the number one sweet, attack, as I tell people right now, that we have really got to prepare ourselves for is water treatment facilities. Right now, people talk about power, people talk about electricity. This year, I'm talking about dams. This year, I'm talking a lot about, the high level risk and the IoT attack factors that we're dealing with water treatment facilities, because out of all the infrastructure that's out there in the United States, water is the oldest. And what's the first thing that they want to do? They want to put that on the internet. And I'm like, that's a bad idea, because if you get somebody that gets in there and starts hacking away and is able to cause pneumatic pressure on 30-year-old pipes, that's bad. They're going to explode out of the road.
Well, we saw that with Detroit and the water issues that we've seen there, right? It's antiquated systems.
Yeah, we've seen it in Mississippi. We've seen it in Flint, Michigan. If you've seen some of the pipes that these guys have cut out of the ground that I've looked at, I'm like going, oh my God, people drink out of that? It's like,
and that's where your drinking water is coming from. It's why I drink from bottled water.
I know, that's the nastiest looking shit I have ever seen in my life. I'm like going, that is like rust. There's not enough Rust-Oleum on the planet that could get that rust out of those pipes. There's not enough stuff, it was horrible. And I was like going, so this is in just, and this is in like a posh neighborhood. This is not like some, this is not some rundown old, 19th, rundown neighborhood. I was like going, this isn't just a posh neighborhood where they're digging up some of these pipes because, the pipes that they're tapping off of have been there since the 1930s, the 1940s. So, and digging that kind of infrastructure up and replacing that is really expensive and it's really hard. But as I tell people, it also generates a lot of jobs, okay? Because in the United States, we are not stressing enough a lot about people. And I'm all for engineering. Trust me, I am so for it. But I'm also for vocational education. And how we can fix all of this in our industry right now is that we need to start bringing back, vocational education in the school systems, because not everybody's going to be a doctor. Not everybody's going to be an IT security guy, but you will eventually need a plumber and a carpenter and a welder. And, and those guys, I've got a friend of mine that is a professional welder and he makes way much more money than I do an hour. It is ridiculous. But, and he loves what he does, and I am for that because, not only am I for manufacturing, but I'm also for industrial manufacturing. The jobs that are created out of infrastructure projects are epic, and I mean
Yeah.
epically good. And that's good for the states. That's good for the economy. That's, good for everybody to be able to do that. And it's not like this stuff is not going away. I mean, it
Sure.
is there to stay. And, we really need to be stressing, hi there. I know you're an electrical engineer and everything, but would you think about, cybersecurity for electrical engineering? I mean,
Yeah.
because you can only trust the vendors so much. Their their interest is a profit margin, not necessarily the safety and security of what you do with their, hardware and software.
Well, and
So-
even on that too, right? Maybe vendor is great. So GE and Siemens and Schneider Electric and Emerson, they're building their system. But at
Right.
a power plant, there's multiple systems. Same thing in a water treatment site, right? I've got PLCs over here from vendor A. I've got vendor B. You usually have 6 different vendors, and yes, they're good at their thing, but they don't know how to integrate with the other vendors. That's not their job.
Yeah, that's the whole point, is there's no interoperability. And we're going to have to set a standard for that eventually, to where it's like, okay, you guys have got to pick TCP, how are we all going to interconnect with each other? Modbus is out on its way out, SMB 1, 2, and 3 on its way out. Everybody wants to be TCP, TMP, and UDP. So I know the networking people right now are just screaming their heads off, into the mic, going, oh my God, I can't believe he's saying this. But it's true, because, in one facility that I have, you've got 22 different vendors. Okay.
Yeah.
And all the systems are different. The only reason that we control and contain those is that we have a software management system that is, that's built for monitoring just OT systems, not IT, just OT. And out of that, we have got basically a 4-year plan that we're having to put together to fix all of that stuff. And it's going to take multiple years because we're dealing with multiple vendors. Schneider Electrical is only going to do so much. After that, it's on you, GE, same thing. And don't even get me started on Siemens. God bless America. I hate those Germans. I mean, they drive me up the wall. But, they've got good stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, saying they don't. It's just that this system is meant as a standalone system. It only does one certain thing.
Yep.
It doesn't work with these other systems. Now, you've got some other, you've got some hardware and some software solutions that are out there. Like, you've got Waterfall, you got the Nozomis, you've got the Clarities that are out there. But, they're not meant for patch management systems. That goes back to your Windows side and your SSEMs and, what you're doing for patch management,
Yep.
Same thing with are all the operating systems at the desired level. So, for example, some of these systems only run on XP. Some of these systems will not work on Windows 11. Some of the vendors even tell you, do not put our stuff on Windows 11, period. Like we go to Windows 7 and that's about it, So there's, risk and vulnerability that's actually put in there because based on the operating system and the stuff that you're using is how's it going to intercooperate with some of the systems that are controlled and maintaining monitoring. Do we do one-way diodes? Do we do firewalls and, in front of these things, do we virtualize them? That's the big thing too, is, do we throw everything in VMware or, whatever and, run it that way? Well, and how good's your network? Because latency matters in a lot of this stuff, especially in fuel generation and gasoline, and petrol-based products, oil-based products. Those pressures, have to be very controlled and maintained in real time. And heartbeat matters, for some of this stuff. And when it turns off, for you people who don't know, it either goes into a safe mode, which means it just stops, so if you're monitoring on the systems like I do, you see those red lines and those yellow lines and those green lines, when those things start lighting up, it's like, something is amiss here, and what could that be? And because there's something that's wrong with that sensor, now in a lot of these things, we can still hand crank them. We can still go out there and, turn the knobs and get it where it needs to be. But if some of these people had it their way, you wouldn't do any of that. They want it all to be digitized. They want it, well, that's not a good thing because sometimes if, what's the failover for that? What if there is a Stuxnet attack, on that system and causes that plant to, either shut off completely or blow something up. You're back now where we originally were in the first part of this conversation, the loss of human life again, and the impact, on what it's going to do. So this is a very circular conversation, and there's no definitive one answer. It's completely different based on what industry that you're looking at and that you're looking at doing. And it's a very, as I tell people, exciting time, because we have gotten to the point to where it is so bad. We have kicked that can so far down the line. We have no other choice but to fix it.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to get to the point to where we have a loss of life, or something like that, to where we have to really start paying kind of attention on, fixing our infrastructure projects and fixing our infrastructure.
You hit a really good point there, right? Is if as you know, a lot of the layman's out there don't see and they don't understand how bad it is. But if we really look at the 17 critical infrastructures, and we're looking at power, utility, and wastewater, and TSA, all the trains and the rail and all the different things. If we just looked at how, I did a power plant assessment last week, and XP was there. The newest operating system they had was Windows 7, right? And that wasn't even, exactly. And that wasn't even patched to the same level. Now, granted, they have other mitigating controls, and they're supposed to be segmented. You know as well as I do, that's not always the case. But if we just took a step back and we looked at the infrastructure in the United States, there's no way, even if we got an unlimited budget, if I was czar, if they made me king for the day, and I just gave a trillion bazillion dollars to America to upgrade everything, there's no way we could do that in a timely manner, right? We're gonna have to find alternate ways. We can't rip out every XP box and every Windows 7 box and replace everything in day one. It's just it's a giant problem. We need to build this thing and start, prioritizing the risk, but having a strategy. But right now we have no strategy. We're baling wire and duct tape.
Yeah. As I tell people, the one I proposed is you make it a law that is passed to where a certain amount of the federal budget and state budgets are written to where you cannot touch it. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's based on our tax dollars. Okay. That is based on money that we, pay back in taxes, and corporations supposedly pay back in taxes to help, the better good, as I help the common folk. Right. So, and there's nothing political about it. As I tell people, there's no politics when it comes into paving a street. Okay, if you want to get political about it, there's a right side and a left side. Ooh, okay, there you go. That's about as political as it's going to get. Fix the damn pothole, right? So this goes back to what you're going to see at a township level, what you're going to see at a state level, and then what you're going to see at a federal level, okay?
Sure.
But what it is that you have a certain amount of dollars that go into that pot, like insurance, that you can't touch until something happens. Okay.
Sure.
So it starts at as I tell people, a local level. Like, how much money am I spending or paying back in city, county taxes and property taxes, whatever it may be, to get stuff fixed, right? And is that being delegated correctly the way that it needs to be done? Okay. Next on top of that is the state. How much is the state bringing in, to where we are delegating that down to the township, right? So it's a trickle down effect that they can't touch. So it's like, okay, 20% of our state, annual budget goes into infrastructure projects. No matter what they are, we can't touch that money. Okay. Colorado did this, and is a very good example of doing this, when they made, cannabis, or marijuana legal.
Sure.
All that money went into infrastructure. They can't touch that money. The state legislature can't touch that money. The feds can't touch that money. Anything that they get from taxes, from the sale of weed, goes into paving roads, goes into building bridges, goes into, improving the electrical system and the water, congratulations, the cities can't touch it and the feds can't touch it, So next, then we go to a federal level, right? And this is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, a 5, 7, 10-year agenda. This is not something like you just said, snap your fingers and it magically happens. It doesn't work that way. The federal government moves incredibly slow, and especially when you're doling out money, they work even slower. And sometimes they use the lowest end bidder. So let me give you an example of that. NASA, when they were building this wonderful rocket that was going to the moon, Buzz Aldrin looked over to Neil Armstrong and said, Neil, how does it feel to be sitting on the world's biggest bomb made by the lowest end bidder? So
that's right.
And Neil Armstrong literally says in The Right Stuff in the book, says he almost threw up in his helmet because he thought about it for about, I was like, oh my God, I'm sitting on the world's biggest bomb, made by the lowest end bidder. And he was right.
Yeah.
So, there is a state process and a federal process of going through bids, which I'm not going to talk about because it just causes me more headache, than it wants me to pull out my eyeballs in some points because this, that process is very slow, to make sure that you get the proper bidding, that's done for these things. And then you've got to energize that workforce. So, the only time that I've seen the federal government literally just get off its ass and do something was during the COVID, pandemic with the NIH and the CDC, where they just started, mobilizing everybody immediately to just like attack one certain problem, right? So if we did this same thing with infrastructure, you're still looking at a 3, 5, 7 year, 10-year process to get all of those monies distributed to the states and then down to the local level to where those projects can start rolling off, and if they even announced it today, like, hi there, we're, and the same thing we're seeing now, even with the infrastructure bill that was passed 4 years ago, we're just now seeing the benefits now. Saying, oh, well, this highway got repaved because of, this project that was passed in Congress, right?
Yeah.
So it's a long, arduous process, but once it starts rolling, it really starts rolling. So I'm not saying that there should be endless construction going on all the time. What I'm saying is there needs to be a checks and balances way and oversight to that. Well, committees that we already have that already exist, and some of them probably need to be eliminated because they're just, fat on the land, as I tell people, but you need to consolidate all that and look at the streamlining of that just like you would a business. Businesses in the, have the ability to turn and pivot very quickly. Government is not. It's like it's like having a bass boat with, 2 Ranger motors that can turn very quickly, and go from one, zigzag all over the river versus an ocean liner. You've got to slowly turn that. It doesn't turn on a dime, No. There's a lot of moving parts that got to go with it. So the analogies that I use when I explain this, to people in layman's terms, and TED Talks or whatever it is I'm doing, even on podcasts, it's like going, do you know the amount of work and effort it goes into writing some of those proposals, and saying, because the federal government, as well as you, even a private citizen, you're going to give me $100 million.
Yeah.
Why the hell am I going to give you $100 million? Well, here's the reason why you're going to give me $100 million. Well, who's involved with that $100 million? So there's a lot of pull back and forth, and so forth. And especially when I do audits and, vulnerability and risk management reports and stuff, is like, I can tell you and give you that information. Now, what you do with that, like I said, it's, it's up to you. You got to figure out what you want to do with it, and I don't try to scare people, into buying, goods and services. I'm vendor agnostic. You need to pick what's going to be best for you. Now, I can point you in the general direction, but, I'm not going to, say, well, you need to use these people because they're the best, like normally.
Well, and I think that's a problem anyways, right? I think you and I both know that there's no technology, there's no silver bullet that if you install this technology, you solve your problem.
Oh my God, I wish there was.
And it's not a finish line. Just like with a road, I pave a road today, it's going to break. I'm going to have to fix it over time. I can't just pave it once and I'm done. Cybersecurity, all this infrastructure stuff we're talking about, it's the same thing. It should be a constant budget line item that I'm doing maintenance, I'm replacing it. What is the lifespan of it?
It's
These
like
control
Medicare,
systems, like
Medicaid,
absolutely.
It's like doing your taxes every year. It's something that it's just one of those things you're going to have to do and deal with. And Oh my
or you're going to have a
God.
problem. If you
Yeah.
don't do your taxes, you're going to have a problem.
Well, you kind of go to federal pound you in the ass prison for that, So, I mean, and you get in deep trouble, right? So,
Yep.
and I'm a firm believer if you don't start, something won't be nothing,
Right.
And if you can, because we in the United States, unfortunately, are a knee-jerk reaction society. Until something bad happens, we don't fix it. It's very much, the blind eye. I see no evil, hear no evil.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of deal. But sometimes you've got to be proactive, on fixing some of these issues, especially when it comes down to nuclear power, water, electrical, and I don't blame vendors. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're trying to make sales and put in stuff and do their work and whatnot. But it's like, I'm fighting with a vendor right now at a certain facility. They only patch one time a year. That's it. Like, that's their patch management cycle. Like, you pay for one patch a year. I'm like, what? I mean, would you, and our CIO and CTO, God bless them, I love them to death. They have gotten into some very venomous conversations with this vendor of like, we will not, work with you and we will rip your shit out, literally, of our facilities and never use you again, only unless you start patching our stuff to, patch these CVEs and vulnerabilities that are out there. So for the general public doesn't know this, there's certain patches that vendors put out that are supposed to fix their stuff. Now, they don't necessarily do that. That's left up to the facility and to the company or the department to do those kinds of things. Normally, you can do it, but sometimes the vendor, if you're depending on your SLA, your service level agreement, and the contracts that you have with them, will patch your stuff. Now, this one was for a really ass old system, and it was like, okay, do we keep paying these people X amount of dollars a year, or do we just replace it, to where it's newer and it's nice and shiny and it looks like the new car? Well, we figured out very quickly, we could have paid for that new shiny new car 5 years ago. Versus what we're having to pay now. So it was just, it was like, let's do the math. Everybody break out your abacus and your calculator, and let's figure this out. And it was like, geez, we could have like paid for a new system 5 years ago if we would have known how bad was, so this is where, like I tell people, this is where I kind of come into play, is that, the company that I work for and the great team of people that I have on staff, we are really good at being professional bad guys. We're really good at being, state actors. We're really good at, knowing, how these systems work and how to get into these systems and turn them off, manipulate them, do whatever we need to be able to do. And, and I don't blame anybody, because sometimes, you've got to be asleep at the wheel until you have a car crash, until to figure out how bad is. And I don't want to see that, affect human life, and I don't want to see it to affect the environment. And I definitely don't want to see it affect national security, because normally when these things happen, they are not pretty at all.
Well, I mean, like you said, you look at Katrina, those of us that were around for that, you look at Katrina, we were a third world country in New Orleans when Katrina hit, right? It was martial law, people dying in the streets. Like it was insanity. That's what would happen if we lost power in this country, and it would happen that quickly.
Better yet,
and wastewater, all those things.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to tell you, since we live in the biggest glass house, what happens if I turn off the internet for a week? No, I'm not talking about power. I'm just talking about the internet. So let me give you a really great example that's affecting everybody still today. AT&T. Last week I spent, oh my God, one meeting after, oh my God, I just much rather you've been set me on fire outside in the middle of the street than having to deal with all the stuff that I deal with trains, planes, automobiles, transportation, and so forth, that are dependent on one service carrier. And we don't have analog lines anymore. They're all digital, and we lost, connection to a lot of our clients lost connection and were down the entire day, which impacted one facility at the wonderful tune of, $100 million. And is AT&T going to pay for that? Are they going to cut them a little $5 check, for their services? No.
I'll send you an Amazon gift card.
Yeah, they lost $100 million,
Yeah.
and how are they going to recoup that? They're not. I mean, they literally lost it. Like, we were that facility was shut down for an entire day. And I mean, they are almost, I mean, literally, they average money by the minute, and this also affected, security at airports. This affected, a lot of things that are in our transportation, a lot of things that are in our shipping lanes, because, that carrier decided that, well, to hell with it. We're not going to test things in our DevOps facility. We're just going to throw it in production. And, we're just
test
going
and prod.
Yeah, test and production. That's the answer right there, kids. So, they didn't do their due diligence. And guess what? AT&T caused out, I mean, people literally could not call 911. It is written by the FCC that no matter what happens to your phone in SOS mode, you'll still be able to call 911 no matter what. I mean, when John McAfee was alive, he said that was the #1 attack vector to the United States on the phone system was, congratulations, all cellular phone carriers by law have to have 911 services available no matter where the hell they are. Well, guess what? We couldn't even get to that. So now you got the FBI, the CIA, the NTSB, FCC for whatever they're good for, investigating, the cell phone carrier that literally, I mean, so that is a real world current example, Now imagine if I shut down, we saw this during, September 11th, the airlines industry shutting down. Right. That is, I mean, they did that for a day. Okay. Yeah. And that cost us, that hit our gross national product. I mean, FedEx couldn't even fly. I mean, and that tells you something right there. So, when you have a national wide ground stop, which we had never had in our history until then, it really affected the bottom line. Same thing. You got a cell phone carrier. Guess what? That affected people's lives in the bottom line, Now, turn off the entire internet for the West Coast or the East Coast. It would literally, within 24 hours, form a recession. I mean, they literally would, if we couldn't, if we didn't, because we live in the biggest glass house, we've connected all this crap to the internet. And, I talk about some of this wonderful stuff, and if you want to read a book about it, which is even worse, and this is written, in the past, was, there's a book called Lights Out by Ted Koppel, and he interviewed like all these people from the power industry to TSA, I mean, you name it, he interviewed these folks. And that was a really eye-opening book, like, of the preparedness of the United States and the lack thereof, if we had a cyber attack hit the United States on critical infrastructure. And I really, first off, it's Ted Koppel, like Uncle Walter. Most people don't even know who that is, or Tom Brokaw. I give him thumbs up. First off, because he did a book, what I call non-sexy news. I mean, critical infrastructure is not necessarily, woohoo, news that people just, totally go out for. But, it is one of those things that until it impacts you, then it becomes news. So, but it's a really good book. It was written, back in 2015, 2016, and it really, kind of gave, and there's been 60 Minutes, stuff that you can see on YouTube about this, that they've done. But, it's very interesting, when you really pull back that curtain and really see how the sausage is made, sometimes you don't want to eat the sausage or the hot dog, but
absolutely,
in the wonderful world that I live in, you pay me now, you pay me later, still got to pay me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the key here is we talked a lot today about all the different critical infrastructures, all the different places that we're at, how we're behind, but it's not going to get solved. We didn't get here in a day. We're not going to solve it in a day, but there's a lot of things that we need to do. And that's why I love having conversations like this. My intent and goal and hope that the audience takes away from this is reach out to your congressman, or, reach out to your local authorities, your city, ask your water environment what they're doing. This matters, right? And we need to start making changes in this now before, left of bang instead of waiting until right of bang. You hear that term in cyber and warfare and all that kind of stuff. Right now, we're still left of bang in a lot of different spaces. There's been a lot of bangs that have happened, and we just haven't necessarily spread that amongst down, or it hasn't trickled down to kind economy, whatever the hell you want to call it, down to all the infrastructure. And we need to continue to push this battle, have these conversations, and make sure the right people hear this, because we need to make changes, or there can be some very big implications, whether it be natural disaster, whether it be a state actor, or, just a bored kid that, the one in North Carolina, idiots shooting out substations and transformers. Any of these things, it doesn't matter what the attack vector is. The outcome is the same. We've got to start making changes.
And, and there are tons, as I tell people, of job opportunities, that are out there for this, from a vendor level, like Siemens, all these people will train you. I mean, they will, that's how I got into it, was that, and on a personal level with me was, that's what really kind of set me on this track, was years and years and years ago, was that, I didn't have a lot of job opportunities, in my location and in the state that I live in. And, and if I didn't have vocational education and, my father, pushing me into computer science, because he knew as well as I knew in 8th grade, that computer that's sitting behind you on your desk, I was like, that's the future. Yep. I mean, most people don't remember the days of green screen and command line only, but I mean, that's, like crap. I mean, I was trying to get this smiley face to wink at me, and I went through all these lines of code and it didn't work, and having to redo it and but I mean, but I said in 8th grade to myself, I was like, this is the future. I mean, I got two choices in my area, and I grew up poor. I mean, I did not come from privilege. I didn't come from money. I had two choices: the funeral business or farming. My family was in the funeral business, and I got sick of dealing with dead people and cutting grass at cemeteries, or I could go work on the family farm. And I didn't want to do that. And I was like, I saw my parents struggle and my grandparents struggle, and I was going, man, this little box, man, this is going to change the whole thing. And then once I figured out this little box is, integrated into infrastructure, and me being, going through college and going into, learning about cybersecurity. And then, how I really got into all of this was in my 20s, September 11th happened. And I was a federal, got my federal contracting license, and I had just got my Security Plus and like 2 other CompTIA certifications. And I was, working at CompUSA. Most people don't even remember CompUSA.
I do.
But I was
we sound to be similar age.
Yeah, I was working as a bench technician fixing Apple computers and PCs. And I was making a whopping $12 an hour with taxes coming out of that. And I was making no money. It was, eating top end ramen noodle, and had a blow up mattress and a television on the floor, living in my, 1-bedroom, apartment in the hood, and I was like going, I've gotten my education, I'm ready to rock, and find a good, job, and I became a private military contractor, and I spent 18 years, working with special forces and working, in 7 different states, 22 different countries. I never thought that I would be able to see the pyramids of Giza in, reality in my life. I had, it's like, wow. I mean, like some of these places I've only read about in textbooks, I got to go to, and I got to travel around and, really get my hands deep into this, and, I contributed to the war effort, in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and I went to all these different military bases doing really cool things, working in counterintelligence, counter-surveillance, espionage, and learning about OT systems, and helping them, secure some of these facilities, that are state, federal, or, nationally owned and whatnot. Like I got to go to the United Arab Emirates. I never thought I'd do that. Never thought I'd go to Egypt. Never thought I'd get to go to Israel, or some of these places that, that you hear and see, read about. Now, most of them are conflict zones, but,
sure,
that's where the Army and the military kind of go. But, they say you're going here. It's like, okay, I'm going that way, and then I came back and then, worked a lot in the transportation and warehousing industry and learned even more, about how these systems are more vulnerable and old and archaic and whatnot. Like, wow, all this stuff plugs into an AS400. It's like, wow, I haven't seen this in decades, but
Yep.
hey, if it runs, it runs, and started interfacing a lot with, cybersecurity companies here in the private sector, and really enjoyed it. And I worked with some really great companies like, Verinos and Dell, and ASA, and worked with tons of different vendors throughout it, and NVIDIA, working on, say, private, contracts and social security projects. And then, the infrastructure companies started calling me, like going, hey,
Yeah.
we really need an audit. We
Yeah.
really need somebody to come in here and tell us these issues and problems that we've run into over the years and how we can fix them, and I really enjoyed that, and now, I am working with a really great company that does, exactly what I do in my wheelhouse. I'm helping with SOC and NOC services and, doing investigations for a lot of the different stuff. Now, how did I get into that? It took, education. It took time, effort, and energy, and it took, a lot of networking and being in the right place and a lot of luck, being in the right place at the right time, for some of these things to kind of fall into place. And I've had my ups and downs in this industry, but, I always encourage, people that are in cybersecurity right now, anybody that can hear my voice, look into OT cybersecurity. It is a very growing field. And it pays pretty well there, kids. You're going to have to hit the books, and I can't do it for you, there are, institutions now that are, even remote institutions that are teaching, about OT cybersecurity, and how it is that, if you want to go work for the state like I do, they pay pretty well on an annual basis. They're not going away anytime soon, and there's also vendors that'll train you in about their systems and whatnot. But, a lot of this goes back into, you got to get your hands in it. It's vocational based, at one end of the spectrum, and then the other end of the spectrum, it's very, computer based. So, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's never, and I'm going to tell you that I will go on the record for this. It's never the same thing twice. It's always
It never is
different.
It is, and it's not. We have the same problems all the time, but it's always a little bit different scenario. And it's always like, holy shit, I've seen this before, but man, that's a different twist.
Yeah, it's like tomato, still tomato, but this is how you say tomato, so.
Exactly.
And people laugh about that, but it's true. I mean, it's so true, but, and I tell people, especially people that see these podcasts like yours that's out there, it's, there is a lot of work to be done, and we need a lot of people to do it. And if you look at the standard right now, considering how far behind we are, we need about I think it was when I turned it into the Department of Energy and the Department of Nuclear Regulatory Commission, we need about 1.7 million people in OT right now. That's not just OT security. I mean, that's from line technicians down to, people pounding the ground to, working on oil rigs. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of people. And, you don't see a lot of people coming into this industry because, one, they don't know about it. Two, they don't want to do the physical labor of the work to get into it. Three, they just think it's going to be handed to them and they take a certification exam and then boom, they automatically are going to get a 6-figure salary. And it's like, no, it didn't work that way. I wish it did, but it doesn't. But
So I'll share in the show notes. Obviously anything for folks to get in touch with you, and if they need to engage you, they want to have an assessment done, any of that kind of stuff. We'll include all that, how to get a hold of you, and all that kind of stuff. Anything you want to make sure everybody's aware, or kind of a call to action. Obviously, we already have the get into this, dig in. There's organizations like ICS Village. It's a nonprofit that I work with that does training. They're at conferences. Go to a conference. Listen to a podcast, reach out to people like me, like Chip. We are here. I'm 100% willing to have conversations with anybody that asks. I don't always have the unlimited time, but I'm 100%. And most of the people that I've come across are more than willing to have conversations, give you some guidance, give you some, hey, this is what I would do, this is what worked for me type of thing. So
yeah, I mean, I do that a lot for students. Like, I don't charge speaking to students or universities or school systems.
Right.
I don't. I mean, that's just me giving back to our industry because no one ever gave it back to me. So hell, I'm going to give it back to them. But like companies and corporations, I do have an agent, and everything is booked through him. Most of my speaking engagements, if you don't, I mean, like I have a family, I have a limited amount of time, but I'm glad to talk to anybody about, hey, if you want to have an assessment done and everybody, you go talk to these folks, but if you just want to have, podcasts with me and talk about some of the wonderful things that are happening in our industry versus some of the bad things that we have seen in our industry that are happening now, because I am not all doom and gloom. Everybody goes, well, Jesus, you're a very scary person. No, I'm a very scared person, as I tell people. I'm very scared of some of the bad things that can happen that I know are preventable, and it's just, if I can head it off at the pass, that's what I try to do for people, is to stop the hemorrhaging before, trying to put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. That ain't going to work, kids. Sorry. I yell, scream, cuss, hoot, and holler, and throw things, and that's why I work remote, because I am an HR nightmare. You want to keep me at a distance, as I tell people, because, I'm very passionate about, this industry. I'm very passionate about some of the things that, I engage in, because I don't want to see the evil things that I can do happen to you. That's the reason. And I've always stuck with that, is because, knowledge is power, but, knowledge and sometimes power can be used and abused in very horrible ways,
Absolutely.
and it's the mode and the instrument of how you want to be able to use that. So I tell people, you want to contact me, that's perfectly fine. I'm only on 2 social media platforms. I'm not on X, Twitter, whatever the hell they're calling it now. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on, Pinterest or any of that crap. It's like I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn, and that's about it, because that's all the federal government will allow me to have,
Right.
Everything in this room is monitored by Big Brother. As I tell people, and I have multiple, ways of not only protecting my digital profile, but I have, I can't even go to a conference without my lawyer. I've had people, serve subpoenas to me, and I'm like, no, you talk to him, not me. So it's like, we want you to talk about and testify in this, blah, 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 blah case. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. If you want to book my time, you talk to my lawyer over there, and he and I are very good friends, and we've been, bosom buddies for years now. But it's pretty sad that I go to a conference and I have to wear a mask, or I go to a conference and I got people that are trying to sequester me for a jury.
Right.
I laugh about it.
Take some of the fun out of it, doesn't it?
I laugh about it. My wife does not.
You're
going to get killed. I'm like, I'm not planning on it.
Well, hey, man, I appreciate your time today. It was an awesome conversation. Maybe we'll do it again and talk about the fun stuff, or the happy things, and what's the good side of it.
Sure.
I know we focus a lot on the negative, but it's the truth, and I think it's a conversation that we need to have. So thank you for the time. I'm sure that we'll cross paths again soon. We seem to have a very similar background, and a lot of the things all the way back from the Mac over there in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for your time today, bud. I appreciate it.
Thank you all so very much. Y'all have a wonderful day today.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.